Hi, welcome to episode 1 of Educator's Edge. I am Mandie Mauldin, founder and lead learning systems architect at Learning Redesign Partners. New federal accessibility requirements are raising the bar for course design, but they're also opening the door to stronger, more inclusive classrooms. Today, I'll show you how Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, can make meeting these new standards more student-centered and effective. And best of all, you'll leave this episode with concrete strategies you can start using today to build accessible, welcoming learning spaces for all students. Looking at all of the requirements may seem overwhelming, so I wanted to include a summary to give you a general idea of what the regulations are. I'm hoping that makes it feel more manageable for getting started on this, because the earlier that we do it, the less pressure we'll feel as we get closer to the deadline. So the new regulations require that all education institutions receiving federal funding ensure that web-based and digital content is accessible to all users. This applies to LMS systems like Canvas and Blackboard, course websites, digital handouts, syllabi, lecture videos, and communication tools. Compliance is expected to align with standards such as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I did include a link to that in the comments, so please make sure to take a look at that when we're done with the episode. The key takeaways for this is that institutions need to be proactive when it comes to their accessibility and not just rely on retroactive accommodations when students come and voice a problem. For over a decade, I've been using Universal Design for Learning to support all students in their learning. UDL makes your classroom accessible to everyone. Through this course design, I have found that I'm able to reach and meet the needs of 95% of students, making it much less burdensome to provide accommodations. By designing for all of your students' needs, it reduces the dependence on specialized services like special education and disability resources, and it eliminates the need for differentiated learning, which can be challenging for teachers to implement. Universal Design for Learning is a framework that builds accessibility into course design from the start. It allows you to create flexible content that works for multiple diverse learning needs. It ensures that materials are usable by students with different needs. It reduces dependency on individualized accommodations. It boosts engagement for all students. And believe it or not, it reduces long-term workload and costs. Once I had gotten UDL fully implemented into my class, I really have found that not needing to address the needs of specific students has saved a lot of time and allowed me to provide more support to all of my students. UDL actually came from architecture. I want you to think about an architectural item for a moment. I want you to think about the doorknob. Originally, we often saw knobs like this. They require you to be able to grab and twist your hand. For some people, that's not possible, and it limits their access to spaces. Now, you will often see handles. These are much more usable as they don't require to grasp, and in fact, sometimes when my hands are full of books, I find these helpful because I can use my elbow to still open the door. This is a perfect example of universal design improving access for everyone. At some point, we began replacing the more difficult doorknob with handles. But where do you start? Well, I would suggest starting where people need access the most. I would think that might be the bathroom. Eventually, all of the knobs are replaced with handles, and then you move to another set of doors that maybe is the second most frequently accessed room. I actually implemented UDL in a very similar way. I started by identifying what I felt was the biggest challenges that my students had. That was word problems. As a math teacher, I suppose that was not too surprising because, in fact, I was not a fan of story problems when I was in math. But anyway, I digress. So once I decided that that was the biggest challenge, I happened to have two dyslexic students in my class. I wanted to try to figure out how I could help those students in their learning of story problems because I figured that if I was supporting them, I would be able to be supporting most other students. In talking to them, they said that tracking from the board to their notes was extremely difficult. And I envisioned that trying to take notes of word problems up on the board could be particularly challenging. So I decided to start making guided notes. I had one chapter where we covered application problems, and so I decided that one quarter I would just make guided notes for that chapter. What I found is in my evaluations at the end of the quarter, the thing that students mentioned the most that they liked and found most useful in my class were those guided notes. It came from all students, not just those with disabilities or identified learning challenges. That's the thing that I love so much about universal design for learning is that it is truly universal. So if we do it right, we can be helping those students who struggle the most, and in doing so, just like with the handle doorknobs, right? It can help access for everyone. For implementing these regulations, I would encourage you to use the same principle. Basically identify what the biggest challenge for your students are, or maybe the most frequently used thing in your class, and start there. Once you're done with those, you can then move to the next thing. If you think about everything that you need to do, that can be really overwhelming and make it very difficult to move forward with anything. So what are some examples of things that we can do? Well, for class documents that include syllabi or handouts, you can use clear headings and styles. This allows screen readers to navigate your documents and, again, making things accessible for everyone. Always use high contrast colors. So notice in this video, I have something with a dark background and light font. That's something that you will always see me use because that helps everybody, whether you're visually impaired or not. For websites and LMS pages, add alt text to all images. Use descriptive link text, for example, say download assignment guidelines instead of click here. And then for all course materials, provide captions for videos or at a minimum, transcripts for recorded lectures. So looking at this list, what I would suggest is think about, is there something in my class that I use more than other things? So if I have a class that is very heavy in videos, I would make sure that I started with captioning my videos, probably starting with one that covers material my students are least comfortable with. I would then move to the next least comfortable and so forth until I have all of the videos captioned. You can do that with everything. And maybe you need to get your syllabi and calendar accessible because everybody is going to access those. And then you also focus on the captioning. So the main thing is that you are addressing the key things. And then we have until next year to get everything meeting the regulations. So by starting now and starting one step at a time, you can really start making measurable change. So remember, start small, but start now. Every change you make today moves you closer to full accessibility, student success, and compliance with federal law. Make sure to go into comments and subscribe so you can continue receiving helpful tips. Also, don't forget to post questions. Your question may get answered in our next episode. And remember, you help shape this vlog. Watch for the next episode, which will be released on May 20th. We will explore why accessibility is key to student success and boosts learning and retention. Small changes, big impact, every learner, every time.